Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'll be reviewing the Borg Assimilator, a ship so large that Cryptic had to increase the maximum zoom out distance on both PC and console. Yes, it truly is that large. As always, chapters are listed down below. The first thing I want to take a look at is how to get the Borg Assimilator, and unfortunately, this is another direct to Infinity lockbox ship, meaning that it is going to be quite expensive to obtain per character. So if you happen to have opened Infinity lockboxes and you manage to get the Infinity Prize Pack T6 Ship Choice Pack, then that pack would contain the Assimilator as an option. That was added to the Choice Pack on PC on December 5th of 2023. And for those of you on console, I would expect it to drop sometime later in January or possibly early to mid-February at the latest. Now, if you don't want to go through and gamble for it, it will of course be available on the player exchange. However, it is tending to be one of the more expensive lockbox ships on the market, sitting at typically above 1.4 billion. So it's not the cheapest ship to get. If you do want to get the ship for free though, without gambling for it or paying a billion plus EC, it will of course be an option from the 2024 event campaign, which I would expect to see start up here sometime around March or April. The next thing I want to quickly take a look at is where exactly this ship comes from, because it doesn't look like the Borg ships we're used to seeing in the TV shows or movies. And that's because it's not. It's not from any TV show or movie. Rather, it is from a very old Star Trek game called Star Trek Armada 2. And that's a game from the early 2000s. You can still play it, of course, through GOG, but the graphics are not the best, so they brought that into stow. They gave it a bit of a visual overhaul to bring it to modern standards, and with the current content focusing on the Borg, they brought this ship in to replace cubes in most Borg content so that they could move cubes up to where TAC cubes had previously been, so that when you do encounter a cube, the cube has more impact on your experience. So the Assimilator is the new punching bag and the Borg ship that you see dying very fast in combat rather than the cubes, which were a joke before it. And next up, I want to take a look at the customization options for this ship, but I do want to quickly note that getting the Borg Assimilator does not give you any new materials for the Liberated Borg Juggernaut, the other playable Borg ship that we have in the game. So if you're someone that wants to fly the Borg Juggernaut and you were hoping to get some new skins, that is unfortunately not the case here. Now heading into the ship tailor here, one of the things I want to note right off the bat is when it comes to the interior, there is no unique Borg interior. You are stuck with the generic alien interior that you see on most other lockbox ships. So for some of you, that is certainly going to degrade the experience. Now for the visual options here, you do have a couple templates to choose from. You can have the Assimilator look like the normal Borg ships we're used to seeing with the green accents there. You can have the cooperative visuals if you want to match the Liberated Borg Juggernaut. Or you have the Kingdom variant, which is based on the Mirror Borg that we're fighting in the current story arc. So you can go through and mix and match those, of course. You can put the collective material on while having the mirror pipes on. You can put some patterns on it if you want to try to change it a little bit, but you don't have a ton of customization like you would see on other ships, but that's to be expected with the unique design the ship has and just the large size of it. Having a bunch of different styles for the different parts would complicate things a bit. So not a ton of options, like I said. You can play around with a little bit, but the biggest disappointment here to me is the interior. I know they don't really do interiors anymore, but it would have been nice if it would have at least had access to some other ship bridges. That's something I wish they would do in general for these lockbox ships, is even if it's an alien ship, maybe letting us use like the Odyssey bridge on it, or in this case, the Tal Shiar adapted ships, which do have a slightly Borgified interior, that would at least be something, whereas this standard starship interior is rather underwhelming. The next thing I want to take a look at is the size of the Borg Assimilator against some of the other large player flyable ships that exist in the game. Now, I am going to spend a couple minutes doing this comparison, so if you want to skip ahead to the next topic, remember chapters are listed down below. So up on screen now is some footage from a demo record that I did on the stream when the Borg Assimilator was first released into the game. And at the top left here is the Romulan version of the Enterprise J, the Valkys. Then there's the Enterprise J itself, a liberated Borg Juggernaut, the Vokuv carrier, a Borg Askew variant, and there is also a Galaxy X up at the top there. Now, you don't see it in this picture, but the Borg Assimilator is hiding another ship behind it, or under it. And it's not a small ship. And I'll go down here and look up, and it is actually the Nadarian Defender, which I think many of you would think of as being one of the larger ships. Not the largest, but definitely one of the larger ships in the game. And it was able to hide under the Borg Assimilator there, completely out of view. Now, if we go up a little bit, you'll see that the mass of the Borg Assimilator is just dwarfing all of the other ships here. I think there's no doubt that the mass of the Assimilator just beats out every other ship that exists here. The Borg Askew, it's not even like the size of one of the side pylons or whatever for the ship. The Vokuv, again, is dwarfed by the Assimilator. This Galaxy X variant over here, it just is tiny compared to the Assimilator. And if you look at the liberated Borg Juggernaut, the liberated Borg Juggernaut is massive, but the Assimilator does also beat it. And with the Enterprise J variants, like the Valkys, the Durgath, or the Enterprise J, they might be wider or longer in one dimension, but I think it's pretty clear that the Assimilator does beat all of them when it comes to just the raw mass of the ship. Now, another fun comparison here is these things here. These are the hangar pets on the Borg Assimilator, and they are larger than most of the escorts in the game, and even some of the smaller science ships or cruisers that we have. So I'm going to skip ahead in this demo record now, and there will be some more ships that spawn in. So there's a Xindi Briostris, which is a medium-sized ship, and again, it is just completely dwarfed by the Assimilator. You can see a Voyager class here, and it is comparable to the pets this thing has. There's a Scimitar also, which you'll see is dwarfed by the Assimilator here. Yeah, the Scimitar, it's a large ship, but the Assimilator does certainly beat it. And if I go a little bit further here, there will be a Durgath and a Zentar that also spawn in. There's the Zentar. So the Zentar is the Zenkathi Dreadnought. It's a pretty big ship, but again, just the mass of the Assimilator just beats it massively. And then here's the Durgath. This is the KDF version of the Enterprise J. Again, it is, maybe wider or longer, like the other Enterprise J variants, but mass-wise, it's not really a comparison. The Assimilator, hands down, has significantly more mass than any of the Enterprise J variants. And again, the pets are also quite large. There's Voyager again next to it, and a Voth Rampart. And the pets, again, are the size of most ships. So, is it a big ship? Yes. Is it the biggest ship in the game? It depends on how you determine the size. If you're going by the length of the ship, there's probably some bigger ships like the Enterprise J variants. If you're going by the width, I think the Valkys is going to be just shy of the width of the Assimilator. And if you're going by mass, the Assimilator just wins hands down against any of the other ships here. But enough with this. Let's take a look at some actual combat footage of this ship in action so you can see just how much of a presence it has when it's actually in combat in the game. Even just loading into the map, you see it's such an imposing presence. And it is basically, the assimilator like you see in the queue, so it's the same size as that. Now, as I'll cover in the stats portion, the ship does have a very low base turn rate of 7. It's got an impulse mod of 0.15. But when it comes to the mobility, one of the really unique things with this ship is that it has 200 inertia rating, meaning that when you tell it to stop, this thing is going to stop. Which you can see as I head in here. I told it to stop, and it immediately stopped. Now, this is going to be some sloppy piloting, but you'll see that it's really not that bad mobility-wise. This is just an infected advance, so not the hardest content. I did take a warp core breach there to mess me up a little bit. And as you'll see also when I get to the stats portion, this isn't the most perfect ship out there, but it is capable of doing well. Yeah, not the best run ever, but I didn't really have too many issues with mobility with this ship. But I am running things like deuterium surplus, evasive maneuvers, emergency powered engines with the emergency con hologram duty officers. So those pretty much make any ship move well. And even though this thing has really poor turn rate, it does have that inertia, meaning that it will stop when you tell it to. For example, if I head towards this station here, I say stop, it stops. Like there's zero hesitation. This thing basically stops before you've even stopped hitting the stop button. It's got that crazy high of an inertia rating. And heading over to the stats side of things, starting off with the mobility, defense, and power side, the hull modifier is 1.45, so pretty decent. Shield mod is 1, a bit low, but it's still usable. The base turn rate, like I just mentioned in the infected, is 7, impulse mod of 0.15. So turning on this thing is not the best. And something I should also mention with turning is that it doesn't bank. So when you turn this thing, it just is moving to the sides. It doesn't bank like you would expect with most other ships. You're not going to see the ship, turn on its side a little bit. It just stays flat. So just keep that in mind when flying it. And the inertia rating on this is 200. As I showed in the infected, it truly is 200. And I can show you the stats here. That's not a typo. It is 200. And what that means is that when you tell this ship to stop, you can see I'm moving here. If I hit the stop button, it stops. So this thing will stop better than most of the escort ships you fly. Like this thing, when you tell it to stop, it's already stopped before you've finished hitting the button. It's that crazy. And for the power bonuses, this is a miracle worker ship, so it does get a bit more. +5 to weapon and shield, +15 to engines and aux power. And for the layout side of things, it has a 5-2 weapon setup, 3 device slots. It has 5 engineering consoles, 4 science, 2 TAC, and a universal, given it's a commander miracle worker. It has 2 hangar bays. It has the carrier mastery package, and being a miracle worker ship, it does have that innovation ship mechanic and the quantum slipstream drive that you see with all the other miracle worker ships. And given that this is a dreadnought carrier, it can of course use cannons. So for most of the builds I've been trying on this thing, I just slapped my normal plasma setup on it, and it worked quite well. And with those engineering consoles and the universals you have, this is a ship that can run either 8 isomags, or if you're wanting to really boost pets, you could run the newer advanced engineering hangar craft power transmission consoles if that's something you want to do. Though, as I mentioned before, the pets that this ship comes with are absolutely terrible. So if you're going to go with a carrier heavy build for the ship, make sure you're using some of the better pets out there, like the rare Toadouge, the Valkyrie, or any of the other good ones that you happen to have. The ones that come with the ship, absolutely terrible. And heading over to the bridge officer layout, this has a commander engineer with miracle worker, a lieutenant commander science with command, lieutenant commander tac, lieutenant universal, and an ensign universal. The weaknesses of this bridge officer layout is that if you want to use concentrate firepower 3 or suppression barrage 1 to take advantage of that lieutenant commander command seat, then you will lose the ability to run a Gravwell 1 on the Lieutenant Commander Science. So keep that in mind if you were looking to run this ship with a Gravwell and any of those command abilities. And for those of you wanting to do something like Beam Overload 3 plus Torp Spread 3, unfortunately you only get the one Lieutenant Commander attack here, so you can't do that type of combination on the ship. And before I get into the accessories, there's one other thing with the ship that I do want to cover, and that is, can this ship rock and roll? Because that is something that I know some of you like to do when messing around, especially with these larger ships. So I'm going to change my primary spec over to pilot, and I'm going to see if this ship can indeed rock and roll. So let me turn myself back towards New Romulus. I've got rock and roll here, and let's see. This ship can indeed do rock and roll if you want to play around with that. So hope that answers that question for y'all that were wondering. And next up, I want to take a look at the hangar pets here. So up on screen is how these pets change at different ranks. The rare and very rare versions appear to be the exact same. The elite rank that you can get from your fleet starbase does gain a beam overload, but aside from that, they all seem to be quite similar. Now, the gimmick on these Borg Assimilation probes is that if they are the ones to land a killing shot on a foe, they can assimilate that foe. Now, this doesn't create an additional pet for you. Rather, it's a very underwhelming effect in that the pet will change into whatever it assimilates. It still is doing its own damage type. It does get a damage buff based on whatever it assimilates. But if you go in and assimilate, say, a Borg cube with one of these pets, you're not getting the abilities that Borg cube had. Your pet is still doing its normal damage type. It's, it's firing its plasma beam or whatever, but it's not actually going through and using the abilities that NPC would use that it assimilated. So it's a bit underwhelming in that regard, but the gimmick is very fun if you can get it to work. But the issue is that combat in Star Trek Online is too fast-paced for these pets. That's just the simple, hard reality for them, is that they have to be the ones to land the killing blow. They have a slow rate of fire. They don't do much damage at all, and in most situations, either you or an ally in your match are going to land the final blow on a foe and take them out before these pets have that opportunity to get that final blow to get that assimilation. So when I was trying to use this in just normal gameplay, I spent 3 to 4 hours flying the ship around in like average TFO gameplay, and I only saw it get to go in and adapt or assimilate 2 enemies over that time period. I had to intentionally stop shooting at foes and sit there and wait several minutes for these things to do enough damage in order to go through and see them actually assimilate and turn into that foe in some of the solo content I was trying to do. And it was very, very disappointing. But when it does work, it can be fun. So I was able to go in and even get one of the assimilation probes to assimilate the crystalline entity. But the issue is it took forever. Now, I've got some footage up from this run where I was able to get them to assimilate the crystalline entity. And I've also seen others put up footage showing that they were able to assimilate, various Borg ships, transformers, gateways, There doesn't seem to be a limit as to what these things can adapt or assimilate. The issue is they do very little damage. So you can see here I'm 4 minutes 40 seconds into this video recording that I have, where I just let the pets do their own thing. And I was over here, the HP on the crystalline entity was going down slow enough that I'm here hitting the button to make sure the pets are all out. And they're all there. You can't fully see them, but they are at like the top right there of the entity is one of them. There's another off to the right. But it just takes them forever to get in this final bit of damage. And it's not like the entity has an enormous amount of health left. No, the entity here has like 345k HP left. And with 4 of these pets out, 4 of these frigate pets, and these are the elite version from my fleet starbase, it takes ages for them to go through and actually take the entity out. And again, this is advanced level content. If you were in there with your ship, that entity would have been dead, in a couple seconds. But for these Borg Assimilation probes, they take a while. Like, I showed you at like 4 minutes 40 seconds that it was at like 4% HP, and here we are, almost a full minute later, and it's still got a fair bit of HP left. In fact, let's watch this play out. So you can see the HP there. It's slowly going down. 4 of these pets all working on the entity at the same time. The launch animation, I should mention, is also pretty neat. And it'll do that launch animation whenever you hit the button to launch these pets out, even if you already have all 4 out. It'll show the animation, and then just the pet will disappear if you already have 4 out. So to take out 350,000 HP took like over a minute and a half, but like you'll see here, one of them did actually go in and manage to assimilate and turn itself into the crystalline entity. But you can see that it's still firing its plasma beams, it's still doing its tractor beam like it would if it was just its normal self, but it can, move around and just visually look like whatever it assimilated. So it's a neat effect. It's a really neat gimmick. It's fun when it works, but the issue is that in modern STO, with how the gameplay experience is, especially near an end game level, they just don't do enough damage. They don't fire fast enough to be the ones landing that kill shot. And when it comes to performance, they're blown out of the water by much better pets. So the rare Toduge fighter squadrons were consistently doing like 3 to 5 times what these Borg Assimilation probes were doing. I did test these out on multiple streams between different patches of the game, and no matter what I did, the pets simply sucked. The elite versions, thankfully, do perform better than the rare, so if you do pick up the elite ones, they do perform better, but even those elite ones, which you see in these comparisons here, are just really far behind the pulse cannon based pets that we have available. So the Toduge fighter squadrons, the elite Valkyries, the Alliance fighters. Basically, if you're wanting pets that do damage, you just don't use the Borg Assimilation probes, because they just don't do any. It really is unfortunate. They are frigates that can be used on any ship, so you could put them on whatever carrier platform you wanted. They're not locked to the assimilator, but unfortunately their performance is so incredibly weak, and they're not able to really take advantage of their gimmick. So I doubt many of you would actually want to run these on most of your carrier builds, which is rather disappointing. And next up is the console, Disassemble and Analyze. And the passives on this console aren't bad, but the clicky on it has an issue in that it relies on those pets being able to fully utilize their gimmick. And with the pets, unfortunately, sucking, that means that this console, therefore, is also not very potent. So the passive on the Disassemble and Analyze console is 2.6% crit chance, 28.5 Starship Hull Restoration, and plus 10% increased Hanger Pet critical chance. And like I talked about in the stats breakdown like a month ago, that's basically the same as the Friendship console that was released just a few months prior to the Assimilator. So it really, like, it's not a bad passive. It's just a shame to have two carrier focused consoles release within months of each other that are both lockbox that have the exact same passives on them. It would have been nice for this to have had like Hanger Pet Firing Haste or Hanger Pet Crit Severity, just, you know, something a little bit different to diversify all of the stuff they're putting into the game for carriers. For the clicky, it is a charge-based console. It has 4 charges that each have a 30-second recharge. Each activation consumes a single charge. If you use this on a foe, it will hold them in place while extracting samples, draining their shields, dealing kinetic damage, and giving you some crit chance. The shield drain's boosted by Drain X, the kinetic damage by EPG. And if you use this console on a friendly assimilated ship, so that is a ship that's been assimilated by your Hanger Pets, or via other abilities like the nanite torpedo thing, then this does provide a crit chance bonus that will be given to all of your Hanger Pets, and that will persist until you leave the map. In theory, that could be up to 31% crit chance for your Hanger Pets. In practice, again, like I've said a couple times now, getting your pets to actually assimilate something is very, very challenging. So you're not really going to be able to take advantage of the console in that way, and that does heavily devalue it, in my opinion. And on top of the issues with this console not being able to really take advantage of the friendly assimilated ship aspect, it does have another thing that just rubs salt into the wound. If you hit the clicky on this, it is going to lock you out of hitting any abilities or starting a new weapons firing cycle during the 5 seconds it is active, which is immediately a deal breaker to me in most content that I do. If I have an ability that is locking me out of hitting any other abilities or firing my weapons for like 5 seconds, then it best be pretty damn good. But if I hit this console here and I try to fire my weapons, I'm spamming my spacebar. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but until that thing is over, I can't actually go in and hit any of my abilities or fire my weapons. So I get to hit it again here in a couple seconds, and you'll see I can't start a new firing cycle until it's over. 3, 2, 1. I can fire my weapons again. But to me, that is an immediate deal killer. And when I have a console that has that type of lockout, it makes me want to immediately take that console off the ship and just vendor it, because that is absolutely terrible design. So hopefully that's a bug, but there's been no response about it for about a month now since the ship released. So we'll see if they ever go through and change it, but in its current state, using this console is actively lowering your damage output, and you're not even able to take advantage of the friendly assimilated ship aspect of it again, because the pets suck so much. And heading over to the Starship trait, Targeted Excision, I was very critical of this trait when it was first announced because it seemed like it was very comparable to Coordinated Assault, which is a Starship trait from a $30 C-Store ship, which launched back in 2015. And my initial reaction was incorrect, stating that it was a direct copy. Targeted Excision is technically an improvement, as it does allow for you to have 100% uptime for both beam overload and cannon rapid fire on pets. So it's closer to SAD, but as I said in the initial breakdown, it still lacks a secondary benefit that adds, some additional boost for having it on your build, which you would expect from a Starship trait that is on a ship that cost $100+ to get per character. So against SAD, for that comparison here, it is closer to SAD in that it's making it so when you hit either Beam Overload or Cannon Rapid Fire, your pets get both abilities for 10 seconds, meaning that if you have Beam Overload and CRF on your build, you can chain them back and forth and have 100% uptime on targeted excision. It's the same thing that you would experience with SAD, where you could have Fire at Will and Scatter Volley go off one alternating every 10 seconds and have 100% uptime on that. But with SAD, you're getting that debuff, which means that even if you're not fully focused on boosting your pets, you still have that debuff from it, which is really, really good value and makes it a very good trait. But Targeted Excision doesn't have anything like that. So if it had like crit D or firing cycle haste for your pets, that'd be better. Debuff like SAD would also certainly work, but in its current state where it just has nothing else, it's a bit underwhelming when you consider that it is a lockbox starship trait. And for the Admiralty card, it has 66 for engineering, 40 for science, 20 for tack, and the special is +6 tack per any ship. And next up, I have a couple quick build examples I want to go through. So bridge officer layouts here for Beam Overload, Cannon Scatter Volley, a tank setup, and a Torp setup on this ship. Starting off with the Beam Overload and CSV builds, these are both quite similar. The only differences are with the tactical seats. So shared between them is an Ensign Universal with Hazard Emitters 1, just for the survivability and dot cleanse. And for the Lieutenant Commander Science with Command, Tractor Beam 1 for the Uncon, Photonic Officer here for some cooldown reduction, and then a Gravwell 1 for some crowd control. On the Commander Engineer with Merc Worker, Emergency Power to Engines 1, Emergency Power to Weapons 2, Narrow Sensor Bands 3, and then Mixed Armament Synergy 3. So those are shared between them. For the Beam Overload setup, the Lieutenant TAC has a Torp Spread 1 and an Attack Pattern Beta 1. And then for the Lieutenant Commander TAC, it is a Chemo 1, Cannon Scatter Volley 1, and a Beam Overload 3. The reason there's a CSV there is because for those of you running like preferential targeting off the NX, that is good to have on. And there's still various traits and abilities in the game that you do benefit from having multiple firing modes on your build. So that's what I would run there. And for the CSV setup, Beam Overload 1 and Attack Pattern Beta 1. The Beam Overload would be for like a comp engine proc. Then Chemosite 1, Torp Spread 2, and a Cannon Scatter Volley 2. For the tank setup, I would do the same for the Ensign Universal as Science, so Hazard Emitters. Same for the Commander Inge with Merc Worker as the two do builds I just showed. On the the Lieutenant Commander Science with Command, it'd be Tractor Beam 1, Photonic Officer 1, and then instead of a Gravwell 3, I would swap that over to a Suppression Barrage 1. Suppression Barrage is the meta for tanking right now because it is actively lowering the damage output of anything that your weapons hit. So pretty good to have on for a tank build. For the tack setup on the tank, a Torp Spread 1, an Attack Pattern Beta 1, Chemosite 1, a Rapid Fire 1, and a Fire Wheel 3. Now, the Cannon Rapid Fire here would be so that you could have another firing mode on if you're wanting to run the Fleet Colony attack consoles, and it's also not going to interfere if you're doing Entwined Tactical Matrices, ETM, to have higher fire will uptime on your tank setup. And if you want to do a Torp setup on this ship, it would be a Hazard Emitters 1 again. That could be another Uncon if you wanted, or another TAC ability, doesn't really matter. For the Commander Inge with Merc Worker, this would be Structural Integrity Collapse 1, Emergency Power to Engines 2, and then a Let It Go 3, and then a Mixed Armament Synergy 3. Structural Integrity Collapse here is the Lockbox Bridge Officer ability. It's a debuff for kinetic on your target. Let It Go is a winter event thing that does debuff a target, but it does take a while to fully debuff, so make sure you only ever use that on a big target. For the Lieutenant Commander Science with Command, Tractor Beam 1, Photonic Officer 1, and then a Concentrate Firepower 3. CF3 is pretty much essential if you're doing a torpedo setup. That's how you're able to fire so many torpedoes all the time. Make sure to use that or mark it on the larger targets you're shooting at. For the Lieutenant TAC, Chemosite 1, and then a Mine Dispersal Pattern Beta 1. You have to pick between the Mine Pattern and Attack Pattern Beta here. And if you're running a traditional Torp mine setup, you'd probably want the mine pattern. Then I have Fire at Will 1 and Cannon Scatter Volley on for ETM. You use those to get some Torp spreads on your build. And then the High Yield 3. And like I have noted here, Hazard Emitters 1 can be swapped for whatever. And while this ship doesn't have a ton of TAC console slots, if you're looking to try a Torp setup that's also boosting Hangar Pets, this ship could do 8 of the advanced Hangar Pet torpedo consoles if you want to play around with that. And just note, for any of you thinking isomags, just remember, isomags do not boost torpedoes. And now it's time for the ship comparison, and as always, I'm going to be using Fleffle's sortable filterable ship list, and there's a link to that in the description for those of you that want to mess around and do your own comparisons. So the ships that I would compare this against are the other 2 hangar bay ships out there, ideally ones that have 7 or 8 weapons. So for that, there's quite a few ships out there. And if we narrow that down to the ones that also have Miracle Worker Command, that's going to be the Zenkathi Zentar, the D7 Miracle Worker Flight Deck Carrier, the Discovery Constitution. There's not a ton of Miracle Worker Command carriers out there, but there are a few notable ones that do get quite a bit of attention. So I compared against the Zentar in the initial stats breakdown, and I still think that that is probably the one that best is suited to compare against the Assimilator. They both tailor towards different playstyles. With the Zentar, you're getting a more tactical focused ship. You're getting 5 TAC consoles on it, and with it being a Miracle Worker ship, you could have up to 8. Whereas the Assimilator is leaning towards the engineering side and is able to take advantage of the newer stuff like the Isomags or the advanced Hangar Pet consoles, which also released alongside the Isomags. So with the Assimilator, you're getting the ability to focus on the newer things that they've released, whereas with the Zentar, it's better suited towards working with the things that have been around for a long time. Now, the D7 Miracle Worker and the Donnie are another set of ships you could compare the Assimilator against. They both have Miracle Worker in command, though the issue with the D7 Miracle Worker and the Donnie is that they only have a lieutenant or a lieutenant universal with command. They don't have a full lieutenant commander command, so they can't do things like concentrate firepower 3 or suppression barrage 1. So for a tank build or a Torp build, they're not as effective. But for a more traditional hybrid setup where you're trying to do like hybrid energy weapons and still, boosting up your pets, I think the D7 or the Donnie are probably still going to be better, especially as they have the ability to have 2 lieutenant commander TACs if that's what you want to do. That means you could do Beam Overload 3 and a Torp Spread 3 or a CSV 2 plus Torp Spread 3. You just get a bit more room with the bridge officer layout on the Discovery Constitution or the Discovery D7. So the Borg Assimilator is good, but there are other carrier platforms out there that can do similar things. If you're on a budget and you just don't want to look at these, really expensive lockbox ships and you want a carrier that has a ton of engineering consoles to mess around with, the Cardassian Gamorra Intel Flight Deck Carrier is sort of similar. It's a bit weaker in some ways, like that Lieutenant Commander engineer there, but that's a C-Store Flight Deck Carrier that you can pick up that has 8 weapons. It's a 5-3 weapon setup. It can run dual heavy cannons, and it's got 2 hangar bays, 5 engineering consoles. So it's not a Miracle Worker though, it's a Commander Intel, but that still means you could have 7 of the Hangar Pet consoles or isomags on it if that's what you want to do. So at a budget level, the Cardassian Gamorra would be something to consider. The Suliban Silic would also be a good one, or the other variants of it, the Orion Blackguard, the Tellarite Praelum. These 3 are the exact same ship, so if you want to play around with one of those, that would also work as well. Those are also 5-3, 2 hangar bays, and they're also quite effective. So you do have some budget carrier options you could mess around with, but for the Borg Assimilator, I think it has its own little niche, and I think it works well for it. But the alternatives like the Donnie and the Zentar still have their own place as well, and are going to appeal to different types of players. And the next thing I want to talk about is something that I found when copying this ship over to Tribble back in December. So I was hoping that the test map had been fixed. Unfortunately, it was not. But while copying the ship over there, I found that the game was on a different version because Cryptic hasn't been maintaining Tribble like they have been in prior years. They've been letting it get a few patches behind, which has been hurting the performance of it. But what I found also was that the Borg Assimilator over on Tribble back in December had different stats. So the console layout was different, the bridge officer layout was different, and the name of the ship had intel in it, whereas the version of it that we ended up getting didn't have intel on it at all. Now, with all of the different changes that the ship had over there and the poor performance of the accessories, I really found myself wondering, was this actually meant to be a lockbox ship? We didn't get a free fall event ship in 2023 like we had been in the past couple of years. Was this ship maybe meant to be the free fall event ship? With the fall event ships, they only have a single spec seat on them, and the version of this ship that was on Tribble had a single spec seat on it. Now, I think the version on Tribble was probably an in-between version. If this thing was initially meant to be an Intel Dread, and if it was actually like the event ship, then it would have had just a Lieutenant Commander Intel and wouldn't have had any specialization on the commander. But clearly something changed. They decided to monetize it. But seeing a single spec version of the ship over there really gives me the impression that this ship was not meant to be a lockbox ship. And here's the stats side by side for holodeck versus Tribble. You can see the console layout on Tribble is much more tack heavy, and you can see that the bridge officer layout here is lacking a secondary spec seat. So interesting find there. Again, I'm just speculating here, but with how disappointing the accessories are, it really would not surprise me if this was originally meant to be a free ship. And now it's time for my final thoughts in the summary. I think the ship overall, the ship itself is fine. It can do a tank or torp build better than the American Worker D7 or Donnie, and it does have a different setup on it versus the Zentaur. Enough of a difference that, if you're wanting to do like the Isomags or those Hangar Pet consoles, you would consider this over the Zentaur. But the issue here, as I've been talking about for the past several minutes, is that the accessories are some of the most disappointing I have seen in a while from a lockbox ship. The pets don't do any damage. They can't assimilate things because they don't fire fast enough. They never get the final blow unless you actively stop shooting and give them a couple minutes to take the target out on their own. The console doesn't do enough damage to make up for the fact that it locks you out of hitting abilities or firing your weapons for the 5 to 6 seconds it's up. And the Starship trait, like I said before, it is technically an improvement over the C-Store variant, but it should have something else on it to give it some more impact for a build, because even if you have it, you're probably still just going to run Superior Area Denial instead, because that debuff also helps your pets out quite significantly. And like I just said on the last slide, the poor state of the accessories and that Tribble info showing a single spec version of the ship really does give me the impression that this was meant to be the free fall event ship in 2023. But, clearly the stats have been improved, but the accessories were not. And overall, like, the ship itself's not bad. Like, if you're wanting a big ship, then you've probably already purchased this. Same for if you're wanting a Borg ship, you probably purchased it before I even got this review out. But given just how poor the accessories are, I can't really recommend the ship, especially given what it cost. When I put this slide together, it was 1.3 billion, and now it's up to 1.4. I look at all of the other lockbox ships out there and what type of impact they can give you, via Starship traits and consoles, and this just ain't it. Like, I can't recommend this ship. If you're wanting a carrier, I think looking at like the Terran Acheron from the lockbox choice pack would probably be better, or like the Zindia Briostris, just one of the other carriers, not the Friendship either. The Friendship also sort of sucks. The console and trade outfit are garbage, but it's an okay carrier. You can make it work. It just isn't, to me, worth $100. And for those of you considering getting this from the 2024 event campaign, again, the issue I'm going to have here is that there's so many ships that have been released even just in 2023 that have a lot of impact value on them, like the Goran Hunter, which makes Plasma the top option for energy weapons in elite content, the World Razor, which is an incredible platform and has a really good trade on it, the Connie 3, which is a decent like beam platform and has two of the best phaser beams that you can get on it, the Shrike and some of these other ships. Like, it just is hard to pick this ship over the other lockbox and premium ships that have been released. So my final thoughts are, I think you should save your money. If you have $100 and you're really wanting to invest it into a carrier build, the thing that I'd recommend is the 12th anniversary bundle. The 12th anniversary bundle is going to get you superior area denial, SAD on account-wide unlock through the Mirror Strikewing Escort, and you're getting a coupon with that bundle as well. So you could get one of those C-Store carriers I mentioned, like the Cardassian one, the Intel flight deck carrier, whatever, like that. That's a good carrier. You could get yourself a pretty solid C-Store carrier, and you'd have SAD, which would give you a significant impact for a carrier build. So, like, the Borg Assimilator is not bad, but at the same time, I just am having a very hard time thinking of why you would want to spend $100 on it. So hopefully that helps. I know this review is a little bit different than the normal ones I do. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them down below. And I'm sorry this video took so long to get out. I had a lot going on in December and still have a lot going on. So finding time to record a longer video like this has not been very easy. But thank you all for tuning in. I will see you guys around.